Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to get started. Thank you so much for joining us, and welcome to the last webinar in the Living with Wildfire webinar series. My name is Zoe Fung, and I'm the Wildfire Conservation Coordinator with the Contra Costa Resource Conservation District. So as more than one of 90 RCDs across the state of California, the Contra Costa RCD facilitates the stewardship and conservation of natural resources in Contra Costa County. Wildfire is an inevitable phenomenon and can be a positive and regenerative force, but catastrophic wildfire negatively impacts both our communities and our natural resources. This series is designed to help county residents reduce their risk of catastrophic wildfire, learn about the ecological benefits of fire, and become adjusted to living in a fire-adapted region. Over the last year, we've learned about the Bay Area's historic and contemporary fire regimes, explored the socio-political contexts that impact our current land and fire management practices, and we've heard directly from local professionals and academics about wildfire mitigation activities that we can implement on individual, community, and landscape scales. To close out the series, today we're going to hear from Captain Shawn Anderson, Fire Captain at the East Bay Regional Park District, and James Edwards, Forestry Assistant at CALFIRE, about how wildland fires are detected, managed, and contained through coordinated multi-agency response, and how damages from fire suppression activities are mitigated. Before we begin, please note that the webinar is being recorded, and we will have a Q&A session following the presentation, so please feel free to use the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen to submit questions during the presentation, and we will answer those at the end. I'm also going to put a feedback form in the chat, so please feel free to provide feedback for the series. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon, and I'm going to pass it off to Captain Anderson and James now.
Good afternoon, everybody. Let me share my screen here for just a second, and I'll jump into it. All right, can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I want to give a little backstory before I jump into this. When Zoe and I originally began talking, we were going to talk more about the suppression repair, which James is going to cover. But I kind of want to take this in a little bit different direction, and partly because I'm not very knowledgeable when it comes to suppression repair. I'm more on the suppression side, the reactive incident side versus the post-incident rehab. So what I had discussed with Zoe about was going through the mutual aid system, and what that is, that's how fire departments and cooperators, they help one another. We recognize we can't all do something as one individual department, no matter how big or small we are. So I wanted to touch on that and some of our foundation principles, and then use the Summersville incident that we had about a year ago to kind of highlight how all that comes together. And that's going to go all the way from the time of when the fire started to when the fire is controlled, and then we'll transition to James going through suppression repair. So as Zoe mentioned, all the questions are going to be held to the end, but appreciate any that do come up throughout this. So without further ado, I'm going to start this off. So what we're going to cover today is how the mutual aid system works. In a nutshell, what that is let's say East Bay Regional Parks has an incident, and we need even something as simple as a medical. We needed an ambulance from Berkeley or Moraga or Orinda, and we make that request. So that is what mutual aid is. It goes two ways. It's back and forth. They request a resource from us, we provide it. It's literally neighbors helping neighbors. I'm going to talk about how the system's very robust and some of the training that goes along with it that makes the system work. We're going to talk about, of course, reimbursement and the principle of fiscal neutrality, some of the legal governance stuff in regards to agreements, and then lastly, we'll wrap it up with the Summersville fire.
Oh, Captain Anderson, I'm going to interrupt you really quickly. Sorry. I think we can see your screen, but we can't see what slide you're on.
Oh. Okay, let me see if I get...
Okay. Oh, I think I could see it just then.
We had this all working before, so... Anything now?
Yes, that's perfect.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, let's hope that's the only hiccup. So, what is a mutual aid system? Again, as I mentioned, it's neighbors helping neighbors. California is at the forefront of all this. We use a principle called the incident command system, uh, and we're going to get into that a little bit. Mentioned agencies helping agencies, and how a fire incident, medical rescue can go from something very small in complexity to be rather large, and how we leverage all those resources and personnel to meet those needs. And lastly, to reduce the effects of large scale emergencies and ensure the timely deployment of resources. So, purpose of mutual aid, and this is literally the textbook definition: to provide for systematic mobilization, organization, and operation of necessary fire and rescue resources of the state and its political subdivisions in mitigating the effects of disasters, whether natural or man caused. As taxpayers, citizens, public government, we want to make sure that we're always protecting life, property, environment. In any way we can. The way that we can do that is through working well together from both a training aspect in terms of having the agreements and the common communications, terminology, training, so that when these incidents do occur, we can mitigate those and reduce their effects. One thing about the Park District is that as a 2-county agency, we receive and give mutual aid daily. Like, for example, we have one station that's staffed daily up in Orinda, but we have parks in Oakley, Brentwood, Livermore, Fremont. So it doesn't make any kind of sense for somebody to have a medical emergency at Coyote Hills and Fremont, and for us to send fire resource all the way from Orinda. The public very clearly expects better for that. And as us as citizens, we wouldn't want that for ourselves or our loved ones. So that would be an example of us as the agency where the medical or incidents occurring receiving mutual aid. In turn, if, for example, last week we had a fire in Crockett where there's multiple fire agencies requested to provide resources such as engines. That's a good example of giving aid. Now, even though I'm using the term mutual aid, there is another thing that I don't have a slide listed for, which is automatic aid. Automatic aid is a lot more common because what that does, that has agreements already in place. I'm going to help you when I make that phone call, and you're going to help me. Mutual aid is more for those specialty incidents, large scale, they go outside the county, where we really need to start reaching for equipment, resources, bodies. But for the purposes of this, I'm just going to use the term mutual aid because it actually goes up beyond the jurisdiction of where the incident occurs. So I've kind of touched on some of this stuff originally. Why is mutual aid important? No one agency can do it all, especially, given the complexity, the type of emergencies that come in. We train for everything, but that one thing that we don't always consider is kind of thing that always seems to show up. Murphy's Law is something that has gotten me so many times, and it allows us, knowing that, it gives us ability to remind ourselves how well prepared we have to be. Sharing of resources across geographical and political boundaries, and as I mentioned, experience, training, and cooperation to help reduce the impacts of cultural, ecological, and historical resources. So one thing for us as a park district is really big is we're an open space agency. So we do have a lot of those cultural, historical sites and points of significance throughout the park district that we want to ensure that we protect for future generations and our park users. So, a history and evolution of mutual aid and ICS. So it all goes back to 1970. 16 lives were lost, 700 structures destroyed, 500,000 acres burned. That lack of interoperability really made for a significant event that in 1972 created FireScope. One of the things FireScope really adopted early on was the incident command system, and that has a few principles. Not just a structure from the incident commander, who's a number one person in charge, to a fire resource like an engine company, but also provide for common terminology, some real foundational principles that all the agencies within the state of California were able to adopt. As many things as many means of progress, unfortunately, it comes out of a disaster or a loss. California was the forefront of all of this. And in 1981, the federal government adopted it and became the National Incident Management System. So if you go outside of California, it's called NIMS. If you're in California, it's called ICS. It's the same thing at the end of the day. So why does it matter to the park district? So large incident experience reduces impact on parklands. The photo right there was a fire that we had 2 years ago in Sonol. That went a couple hundred acres. For something like that, we're pulling in cooperators from CALFIRE, from Alameda County, Livermore, Pleasanton, Fremont Fire. So just to give you an example of how one agency can't do it all. Enhances safety for employees and users. So bringing in those people from additional outside agencies, everybody has something that they can bring to the table and some experience that they can share. And so particular people may have qualifications through training experience, such as a safety officer. Well, they'll be designated that on the incident, and they're able to go and look at what the operations are and make sure that they're doing them as safely as possible within reason, being that we do have an inherently risky job. Part of the other reason it matters is it strengthens our partnerships with our cooperators and most importantly, CALFIRE. Being an open space district, a lot of our lands fall within what's called the state responsibility area. And CALFIRE Santa Clara unit's always been probably our number one cooperator in this shared mission and values. Supports fuels reduction work, grants, and prescribed fire. So this is part of that networking and part of the ways that we can build those relationships so we can work together on things that maybe aren't when the 911 call originates. Increased skill set. We all benefit from that as terms of fire service personnel, because it's like iron sharpens iron. If you have knowledge, skills, and abilities that I'm trying to gain or I need to gain, we can do that through this system. And then historical legacy. We want to continue what we've done in the past and just make it better, improve on it moving forward. Okay, so this is kind of an important slide, how the mutual aid system works. So this is kind of where I wanted to touch on. I'm going to give a little structure, and then later on we're going to get into more the 911 call origination. So for the purposes of this, we have to kind of think of this. I'm going to use think of it like a cake, okay? So where the emergency is, that's affected local governments. So, this fire, and I'm going to use a wildland fire, it can go across, city, county boundaries, state lines. Fire doesn't observe any of that. So that's why it says affected local governments in a plural sense. So when that fire originates, it's going to probably be in one person and one agency's jurisdiction originally. They're going to notify their operational area, which is their county, of what resources they need. As resources come in, they might fall into what's called unified command. So that's where you have these stakeholders that are kind of coming together, these emergency managers who are working side by side to mitigate this emergency. So when they do that, but when the incident is confined to the county, it's called the operational area. So it sticks solely within that county. As resources are needed, we can kind of keep it in-house to that level. So from there, if it exceeds the county's capabilities, then we're talking region. So in this region, we have Alameda, Contra Costa County, Santa Clara, Stanislaus, Santa Cruz, San Mateo. So we're able to reach within that pool to pull resources in. And on top of that, we'll be working with CALFIRE, our state agency, to get resources as well. Once it goes past region, those multi-counties, then it's going to go to Sacramento, or maybe even before that, either what's called North Ops or South Ops. So either in Riverside or Redding, in order to reach into those bigger pools, those other regions that are statewide, so that we can get those resources all the way circled back to that affected local government that we're seeing on the bottom. So it kind of works in that circular motion. And we use a similar thing when we talk about demobbing and releasing resources as the incident winds down. So IROC. IROC is not your Camaro that you maybe had in your younger years. It stands for Interagency Resource and Ordering Capability. This was a this is a program that is used to track, order, utilize personnel, release equipment, and it's used for all types of incidents, floods, earthquakes, tsunamis, you name it, for all kinds of just different incidents. It's owned by NWCG, which is a National Wildfire Coordinating Group. They're a federal agency, and we are actually going to be seeing this used more and more, and probably it's going to be tweaked along the ways. I've been in the fire service for over 20 years, and IROC is the third iteration of this that I've seen. So OES Region 2 restat. So what we're looking at here, this is that, as I mentioned, the region aspect, the multi-counties. You can kind of see, I know it's very small, but in the screen, in the image, in the left-hand side and the right upper side, you'll see kind of the county logos of everything that's considered within the region. This tracks all the resources that are available for these larger incidents. CalOES will process requests and allocate resources, then it's trickling back down to the agency providing aid. But to go back to the image, this is an image from September 9th, and then it has the phone number. So any resource like myself, I'm requested and I need to contact Region 2, I have that phone number, I have the email, I know who's in charge. For me being in charge of, let's say, the Regional Parks Fire Department, and we get a request for mutual aid, that'll come from the region down to the op area and then eventually make its way to me. What we're seeing in the left-hand column with all the green, yellow, and red, those are all state-owned OES engines, Offices of Emergency Services. So the Offices of Emergency Services provides the apparatus. Us as the agency accepting it, we provide the personnel and the staffing when needed to ready for deployment. That also includes the left-hand side as well. One of the things that goes with that is not only will we send that resource whenever it's requested outside of it's out of service for some kind of mechanical, we will also receive cost reimbursement that's designed to be cost neutral. If you look at the right-hand side, September 5th, you'll also see where it says Type 3 engines. I know it's kind of small. You'll see 5 boxes that say assigned, and has a yellow box with red lettering. So that's a group of engines that were all assigned to an incident. Same with the next one down there. Looks like they were on something called the Dillon fire at that time. So this is the bottom part of that same image. This has essentially what resources are sent out from what agency. If it's an OES, you see that in green. But if it comes from the county, like you see, like the county sends out a typical red fleet fire engine like you'd see roaming around town. That's what's underneath that. So just not duplicative effort, but it shows what agency has sent and also under kind of what guiding principles or whose apparatus they're on. So opportunities for participation. So this is kind of where we're getting outside of more of the engines and stuff. There's all kinds of stuff that an incident can need. Everything from engines, it says strike teams and task force. Those are groups of engines. It says Eagle right there. That's our helicopter. Air resources can be requested. Sometimes they're contract aircraft, rotary or fixed wing. Law enforcement. So one of the things that's kind of unique to us as a park district is we actually have a team of officers. They're able to go out on these large scale incidents and assist when needed, just on the law enforcement side. So maybe they're assisting with security, with evacuations, anything that is kind of on that law enforcement side of the house. They can plug and play the same way that we can plug and play on somebody else's incident. Single resource. So you don't always need an engine, hose, group of firefighters like that. Sometimes you need just an individual that has specific qualifications or experience. So that's where we talk about single resource. That can be people that specialize in finance, logistics, operations, or planning. And then within that, you also have incident management teams. So think of those single people, but think of them as a package. And that's what makes up an incident management team. It's a group of people from different agencies that are on call and literally can be deployed at a moment's notice to wherever it is in the state of California or abroad. And then there's some specialty assignments out there that are really ancillary that you kind of find here and there. probably not in California. My favorite one is pack mule leader. Um, but we really don't see that too much in California. But if you need a pack mule leader, that is a qualification that you can obtain. Um, so opportunities for participation, some of the things that I've been a part of: San Bruno pipeline, the Costco Busan, when that was very early on in my career, where the Costco Busan hit the Bay Bridge. I was not part of the Palisades. We did send people to the Ghost Ship Fire. Um, yes, we are a park district. We do participate in those kind of events. So yeah, we had people there. Unfortunately, Hurricane Sandy, which was up in Vermont, as I recall. And we're routinely going these incidents all throughout the year, mostly in the summertime, though. So this is where we're going to transition into the Summersville fire. And this is where I kind of want to go from the 911 call to the conclusion of the incidents, and then we'll transition on to Frank. So the incident began on June 18th, 2025. So we're looking at 363 days ago, early evening. The location was the hills above the Mira Vista neighborhood in Antioch. So if you're familiar with Black Diamond Regional Park, it's literally as you start to go through the pipe gate and into the canyon, just off to the left there. Came in at 7:06 p.m. Initial report of just a vegetation fire. It ended up being 358 acres, primarily of grass fuel type. And to suppress all that, it took more than 150 firefighters. We had dozers out there, hand crews, aircraft, lots of support personnel, and more importantly, no homes or lives were lost. So from 911 call to dispatch, most people in here, unfortunately, probably had to call 911 in the past. So what happens is, in something like this, a member of public will see smoke or flame and calls 911. That goes to what's called your PSAP, your public safety answering point. So in this particular incident, it's Contra Costa County Regional Fire Communications, which is actually based in Pleasant Hill. So the call taker will confirm the location, nature, any details, anything else that maybe comes up. They have a flow chart of questions that they're going to ask. That same flow chart, they have them for all kinds of things, for structure fires, for medicals, for rescues, so that there's a systematic process for gaining enough information for dispatching the call. After that information is gathered, dispatchers create what's called a vegetation fire response, or it's also called a run sheet, and then based on the geographical location, send the closest units that's within that. As more information comes in, the response can be upgraded immediately. So let's say fire units aren't seen, but this 911 caller is now saying, there are now homes on fire. Well, that's going to trigger the dispatcher to look at the run sheet and then contact whoever the commanding, the person running the incident is. Maybe they're still en route, and say, hey, do you want to upgrade this or not? And then they'll give their opinion and request what they need. So incident response and critical early decisions. So the first engine respond to report a vegetation fire near Summersville and James Donlin Boulevard. En route, engine 83, which is located in Pittsburgh, saw a large column of smoke and requested a second alarm before arrival. Primary reason that they did this is that they recognized early on that they saw a large column. It's not going to be a small fire. Let's try and get ahead of this 8-ball. They already knew that going into this canyon, traffic flow in terms of getting resources in was going to be challenging, along with water supply issues. As they arrived on scene, the investigator estimated that 30 acres were burning in steep wind-driven conditions. So they also identified that there's several hundred acres potentially with impacts to nearby home. So what the battalion chief did is they assumed command as soon as they arrived on scene, and they ordered additional resources for structure protection adjacent to the park where this fire is going. One thing that was really interesting on this incident was, as being emergency managers, we're constantly role-playing things in our head. And exactly where this fire is, if you ever go through Black Diamond, you'll go through the pipe gate, you'll see the old barn on your left, and then the road completely narrows down. And it's notorious for having communications issues. And that just so happened to be where this fire originated from. And all those same conditions, those complexities existed. And that makes it very challenging early on from a suppression standpoint. So protecting homes at the edge of the park. So as you see on the right, that's where the fire burned from. It actually originated what would be the upper right of the screen and burned downhill towards those homes. This is where the first arriving battalion chief thought that homes were going to be impacted first. So what they did is they brought in additional resources, additional engines to protect those homes on that street and the surrounding areas. That red stuff you'll see is retardant. So air tankers will come in, they'll identify, hey, this is an asset that we need to protect. And that's what you see all that red is. That stuff washes off pretty easily with nice amount of water. It is environmentally safe. The red dye in there, you're probably wondering why there's red dye. That's so the pilots know what they've hit with the retardant and what they haven't. So they can essentially build continuous retardant line off of each other's drops. So this is Watch Duty. I'm not sure if everybody has this app. It's a great app. It's publicly accessible. You can find it in your app store. It's information that is gathered via various sources. It's vetted, and then it's pushed out via the app, and you can receive notifications if you'd like. So right about where the S is in Summersville is kind of where the fire began, just above that where it kind of touched the road. And this is showing what the fire was like. It was probably about 25% contained at this point, and it has a perimeter. You can see right where it says Pintail Drive. We were looking south, so down towards the bottom of your screen in that prior image, almost from like James Donlin. So multi-agency response and mutual aid. So the primary response came from Contra Costa County Fire Protection District. They were the closest resource at that time. The state provided engines, hand crews, aircraft, and overhead. This incident ran multiple operational periods. So when you hear operational period, it's more than one day. Local partners included ourselves, Antioch Police, AMR, PG&E, also our own police department and air unit. Unified command was established between CONFIRE and CALFIRE to manage resources. So both agencies have resources responding into this. They need to have a level of control of those and how that everybody works together. We don't want to duplicate effort, and we also don't want to leave anything kind of out there in the wind. So that's where unified command comes together, is let's bring the cooperators together. Let's come up with a plan. Let's set our objectives, our strategies and tactics, and let's go do some good work. California Mutual Aid System allows agencies to send and receive help quickly across jurisdictions. We covered that earlier in the slide presentation. This was an image that I took of what it looks like at night. So up in the sky, those little dots, that's just simply reflection off of my windshield. So there's no UFOs, there's no planes, there's no nothing like that. This is looking north, so across the Sassoon Bay. You'll see that the fire kind of burned. You can't really tell from the left to the right. And so all those little orange glowy things, that's fire that's left over that we're going to continue to put out as the night goes on. So what you don't see. So I mentioned earlier in the incident, this particular one came with some communications issues. So when I arrived at scene and I was coming from Lafayette, I met with the incident commander, and the very first thing we always like to ask is a good cooperator, a good partner is, what do you need? What can I do for you? They already have a laundry list of things you can do. How can I be helpful? And this gentleman said to me, he goes, I need you to be the staging area manager. So what that is knowing we're going to have a large influx of resources into a very confined space, we need to set up an area where we could have these resources kind of sit and wait for an assignment, and so we could deploy them in a methodical area. So what you see right there on my yellow legal pad is a sketch of the incident as it looks to me. You kind of have that V. So what that is at the bottom of the V where those two lines come together is generally the origination of the fire. We have a left flank and a right flank. Those letters that you see, B, X, T, we call those divisions. So those are geographical boundaries for where we're going to send resources to. And then the rest of the scribbles that you see on there are the different resources, what I have in staging, where they're being sent to, so I can kind of track. So between myself and operations or the incident commander, we can have that dialogue. Hey, what do you have in staging? What's coming? What can I deploy right now? And so that takes a little bit of burden off of them, especially when they're in a canyon, they can't hear. You have these big pieces of equipment coming in that can't really turn around, and then they're getting boxed in. So staging was kind of critical on this one more than a lot of other incidents. So what's our fire department's role? So being that we recognize that we have over 127,000 acres spread across 2 counties, we can't just simply shrug off our fire suppression responsibilities to other agencies. We want to be active participants in that, the same way that they're going to help us out in our times of need. So in this instance, we were the agency in the time of need, with it burning within the park and wanting to protect those historical cultural resources and ultimately return the park back to normal conditions where users can come in. So what we're going to do is, even though we're a small department, we're going to throw as much as we reasonably can at this incident, while also knowing that in the back of our head, hey, something else may come in. We have to, hold back a little bit as good emergency planners in terms of being thoughtful. So what we're going to send typically is we're going to send at least one engine, a typical fire engine like you'd see in your local neighborhood. We also staff a water tender. So that's another piece of equipment. It holds 2,000 gallons of water, because where all these incidents are in terms of wildland, there's not your municipal water systems. There's maybe not water tanks around or anything like that. So we have the ability to bring water to engines. One of the other things that we send is what's we call our duty commander position. So that's a command level position that rotates amongst my level, the fire captain position. And then depending on the incident, we'll also send maybe our PD, more than likely our PD, and also probably our helicopter, which has a Bambi bucket. So that has your bucket that hangs down beneath it, and they can pull from a static water source, such as a lake, a bay, a reservoir, pick up water, transport to the fire, and drop it where it's needed. The other people that we also use a lot are our park operation staff. So our rangers, our park supervisors, the people who really know the ground that's affected. They may have some specific knowledge as it pertains to the park, or something that needs to be protected that we simply don't know as fire personnel, given the scope of 127,000 acres in 2 counties. We aren't capable of knowing every little intricacy of the park. So they're really great when it comes to being subject matter experts of the park itself. So this is a photo of the next day. So this is where we're going to start transitioning to kind of getting what we call mop up done, getting those last little embers taken care of over the next several days. And then it'll start transitioning to fire suppression repair. But I think there's a few more slides after this. So one of the things some of the other things I want to talk about is public messaging. So we work a lot with our counterparts in television, our own internal social media. There's apps like Genesis or Zone. It used to be called Zone Haven, which we as incident commanders have the ability to push out via notification saying these polygons where there's people residing, we want to notify them to either prepare to leave or evacuate their areas. I talked about watch duty earlier. And one of the big things that we want to keep the community informed and the public. And one of the ways we do that is through a public information officer. So that's a designated person who reaches out, and they will do all the media contacts as the media request comes in. It's a delegated responsibility from the incident commander, because the incident commander is trying to manage a whole lot of other things at that particular moment. And we need to worry about that individual needs to worry about mitigating the emergency, not necessarily being in front of a camera at that time. So we'll designate that position where we can. So this is kind of what I want to talk about as attendees of this webinar, and also kind of what we're looking for in terms of a fire department, kind of refresh some of those things that you probably haven't heard of in a long time. Call 911 immediately when you see smoke or fire. We'll always come out. I've came out for all kinds of things that weren't smoke or fire, but the reporting party thought it was. Better be safe than sorry. safer than sorry. Know your neighborhood's main exit routes and have a go bag ready. We see those commercials about this time of year. Maintain defensible space, lean, clean, and green around your home. Depending on where you live within the county, they'll have different requirements for that, and they kind of routinely change. So it's nice to be up on that. Use fire resistant building materials where possible, roofs, vents, and decks. A lot of that is governed by your local building code when you're doing additions, modifications, or new construction. And then stay informed through official sources and alerting systems. So some of those social media things, we want to make sure that we're really vetting that, not maybe a friend of something we heard, but we want to make sure that as emergency managers, as fire managers, that we're pushing out accurate information through those, I'll say, verified sources, whether it's television, whether it's application based, whether it's our social medias, through those official alerting systems. And lastly, we always want to have people respect park closures after fires. Um, when we're having to do post-fire rehab, I understand that there's a lot of people that love the park and they want to come out and they especially want to see it after, how it's changed after a fire. And I get that. But, we also have to be thoughtful of the safety aspect of the park users and the people who are trying to open it up as quickly as possible. Those are some of the references. I'll be sending Zoe this PowerPoint when we're all done. So each one of those has a link that you can look back on if there's something you want to delve into more. And that will conclude my portion of the slideshow. Zoe or James?
One second, getting this up and running. Okay, can you see me and can you see the presentation?
Yes, looks good.
Okay. Thank you, Shawn. Awesome presentation. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is James Edwards. I'm a forestry assistant for the Santa Clara unit of CALFIRE. We service 5 counties in this unit. And today I'll be talking about fire suppression repair. You might hear me talk to it. You might hear me say that to describe it is just FSR instead of saying fire suppression repair all the time. So this first image that you're seeing right now is actually at the Summersville fire. So it's almost in the exact perspective that Shawn showed at nighttime, but this is during the day. But I'll go ahead, get started, and explain what FSR is. So what is FSR? Fire suppression repair is the identification, documentation, and repair of damage caused by suppression efforts. This happens when we initially respond to fires. It can be both CAL FIRE and your local government fire departments while they're out there putting the fire out. This damage can be caused by vehicles, so pickup trucks, utility vehicles, ATVs, heavy equipment such as excavators, dozers, water tenders, anything that's going to be necessary during that suppression effort, and then water application that leads to erosion and the fire suppression activities. Fire suppression repair can take place during and after wildfire incidents. We don't need to wait for the fire to be completely out to begin these repairs. As Shawn made a comment on mopping up the fire, during mop up, we will initiate some of the fire suppression repair activities to clean up some of the damage that was done when the fire was being initially put out. So what FSR is not. So anything that was naturally caused does not meet the criteria for being repaired. We are only looking at areas where human-caused damage requires fixing. So for example, if fire happens to damage a fence line, we're not going to be repairing that fence line just because it was damaged by the fire. We are only going to damage the portions of the fencing that were damaged by our staff, whether it be our firefighters or our engineers taking the fence down, or even the bulldozer going through fencing initially to get a good control line around the fire. We're only talking about repairs that that have been caused by human damage. So some of the common damages that occur when we're fighting these wildfires include dozer line and hand line, which I'll explain those differences and challenges both those techniques present as we continue through this presentation. Some other common damages include property fence posts, watercourse crossings, and creek crossings. So collecting data is where we're going to start off. Some of the first steps of data collection include taking photos of the damage and creating GPS tracks so that we can accurately share that location of damage with resources or local government agencies. This helps especially on larger scale incidents where wildfire damage is extensive. The next thing we want to do is talk to landowners and document our discussions with them. This is important because some landowners have different wants and wishes than others, and some don't want us to repair anything. And that's all right. It gives us the ability to refocus our efforts on areas where damage may be more severe. So this is a picture that was not from the Somersville fire. This was actually the Dino fire. If anybody is familiar with the 152 corridor over here by our Pacheco station, this is actually where that fire took place. So hand line versus dozer line. So our hand line is created by hand crews, which are normally composed of 12 to 14 firefighters. They use hand tools like McLeods, Pulaski's, shovels, axes, and rakes. Dozer line is created by bulldozers. These bulldozers are outfitted with large blades that can be up to 10 to 14 feet wide, and they help scrape the surface of the dirt. Handline and dozer line serve the same purpose in that they both create fuel separation by exposing bare soil, bare mineral soil. This helps slow or completely stop the progression of fire into more fuels like grass, leaf litter, and structures. Uh, if you look at the top right hand side of the picture, you can actually see there's, I think, 3 or 4 homes, and where it's indicated is our hand crew line. So you can see the separation from the black and the green. The green is where we have fuels that are capable of ignition and forward progression of that fire. And then the black is where fire is currently moving through. So you can see that delineation between the two, and you can see how the hand crew line going through the middle there actually creates that separation by having no fuel available for that fire to burn to progress going forward. So dozer line. Here are 2 examples of dozer line, with the example on the right being more severe. You can see the separation of 2 different soil layers on that photo on the right-hand side. The problem that arises from dozer line like this is that it creates a lot of soil disturbance, which can introduce invasive weeds and gives them an ideal location to grow. The second problem is that this disturbance can create areas that erode over time and deposit sediment into watercourses down below. Dozer line also creates large berms that can divert water in different directions and can influence how erosion occurs. Some dozer line can reach several miles long or longer for large-scale wildfires. So these next 2 slides will show the before and after process of repairing the dozer line. The first step of repair, in this case, the photo on the left-hand side is a section that hasn't been touched, hasn't been repaired, and then the photo on the right-hand side is what it looks like after it is repaired. So the first step of the repair is to bring that native soil that was originally pushed out of the way back into the path of the travel that the dozer moved in. So we take those berms, we bring them back in, and we flatten it down. When the dozer line goes over 400 to 500 yards in length, it's typically a better choice to use a dozer for those repairs. However, there are some sections that we will use hand crews for in order to do these repairs. The second part of the repair process is to bring some of that native grass seed that is adjacent to those dozer line berms and spread it over the bare mineral soil, which you can see in that right-hand picture. This can help blend that dozer line in when the grass starts to grow back in the winter and early springtime, so that it all blends together and is actually visually, aesthetically pleasing, essentially. So again, this is the other example slide that I want to show you guys. On the left-hand side, we have the dozer line before repair, and the right-hand side, we have the repair as it's ongoing with our Pacheco hand crew. This is a picture from the Somersville fire. So like I said, this is our particular hand crew. Depending on where the dozer line is, it might be a better choice to use a hand crew because they don't create as much disturbance going back into an area for repair. For this example, the dozer line actually goes through up over the hill just behind the trees, and it dips down into a creek crossing. So in this case, it made more sense to send foot traffic, send our crews in there, instead of sending a dozer back into the watercourse, which would lead to further disturbance and erosion of that resource. We want to try to minimize that as much as possible. So there are a couple different materials that we use for fire suppression repair. Like I said, we use hand tools that the hand crews are equipped with. We use smooth wire, barbed wire, T-posts, T-clips, wattles, and jute matting. As we continue through this presentation, I'll explain the purpose and the benefits of using these tools and materials. So we're going to go with some of the common tools that you'll see, and these are all the fence repair tools that you're going to use. So going from the left to the right, we have channel locks, which can be super helpful for holding onto barbed wire strands and pulling that initial tension so that it is nice and tight. Next, we have fence pliers, which are specifically made for manipulating barbed wire and work really well at twisting and joining old sections and new sections of wire. It's super helpful to use the fence pliers because you don't have to manipulate the wire with your not bare hands, but your gloved hands, which can be a little tricky and sometimes a little painful. But the next tool that we have is the bolt cutters. This is to trim away some of the old barbed wire. This can be barbed wire that has received too much heat during the actual active wildfire. And so sometimes it doesn't make sense to continue to use that old strip of barbed wire because it's just going to break when you start to apply tension, which brings me to the next tool, which is our fence post stretchers. They hold the tension in the line while you're splicing the old and the new sections of barbed wire together. This makes it so that your repaired section of wire doesn't go slack. That's the last thing we want to do is when we do these repairs, we want them to ultimately serve a purpose for a long time, especially on cattle lands where ranchers want their cattle to stay within a certain block or certain plot. So it's essential that that barbed wire or smooth wire in some cases maintains a good tight tension. So if you guys weren't familiar with what smooth wire is, it's the bundle that's on the right hand side of the screen, and then we have barbed wire on the left hand of the screen. So we use two types of wire. Like I said, both barbed wire and smooth wire. Some landowners ask us to use smooth wire on the top or bottom of the fence because they have a lot of deer or other animals that try to crawl under or jump over the fencing. And those animals can get hung up and injured or even die in some cases. So we want to try to please the landowners to the best of our ability, depending on what type of wire they may be requesting. Part of that installation for the barbed wire is to use T-posts and T-clips. On the left-hand side, we have T-posts, and on the right-hand side, that kind of singular piece that's holding the cattle fencing onto the T-post is the T-clip. You can see it's kind of like a viper fang where it goes around the T-post and then the spines on that T-post hold it at that height. So very, very nice, and it helps out again with holding the tension on barbed wire. This is another example from the Summersville fire. So we have an example of two different fence points that were damaged, and you can actually see those in this photo. In the top section of the photo, you can see the old T-posts that were pretty badly bent out of shape. They're lying on the ground in the middle of the dozer line, just in front of the new T-post installation. You can fix some T-posts, but they require a lot of effort with a specialized, specific machine that's used to straighten them out. And it all depends on the condition of those T-posts. Some of them are just too rusted and brittle to be repaired, and some T-posts, they just receive so much heat that by the time we try to bend those into a better shape, they're just going to be too brittle. Erosion control. So on the screen, I have jute matting, which is that kind of carpet rug looking material on the left-hand side. And then we have wattles, which is just pretty much a straw It's a tube that is composed of usually straw, burlap. You can make them out of plenty of different grasses and material, but usually it's just some hay or straw material. Um, and both of these are used for erosion control. They both have their own use cases and can be used independently or together, depending on the severity of the erosion potential. So how it works, you can think of jute matting like a large rug or carpet. It catches and holds small woody debris, plant seeds, and moisture, and allows plants to get established. This is super helpful for areas that have been burnt over or have been bladed over with a dozer, where it's just bare mineral soil, especially on steeper slopes, because we're able to cover that bare soil, get it to retain moisture because there's no plants there, and help plants get established. So helps also to stabilize the banks in creek and water crossings in conjunction with native seeds and plants that do well in riparian environments and seasonal wetlands. Like I mentioned, they're created from burlap or other natural fibers that will break down, keyword, naturally over time, which means we won't have to disturb that area again for removal once it is healed over. So we don't, once we lay the wattles and the jute matting, we don't need to go back into a water course or into a super steep side of a hill or mountain and disturb that with either machinery or foot traffic that we were trying to, repair in the first place. Its job isn't to stop water, but to slow its transportation across the soil. This allows time for new vegetation to get established with even distribution without their seeds flowing downhill or downstream. So this photo was taken at the Creek Fire in 2024, and this was pre-wattle installation. You can see the scale of the soil disturbance from the dozer with our firefighter standing there in the middle of the picture. I don't have a picture of the repair once it was completed, but what we did is we laid about 6 to 8 wattles at 10-foot increments, going from the top of the hill all the way down to the bottom. This spacing is super helpful because it doesn't give water a chance to quickly move down the hill. It starts to, as water or rain event, storm happens, water will hit each of those layers and it'll be slowed down. If you don't have wattles or any erosion control, what will happen is water will go down the hill, it will increase its velocity, and it will disperse that sediment and soil down into whatever drainage or creek is down below. So wattles are super helpful, especially in this instance. This is another section of dozer line. This is actually the section of dozer line that I referred to in my example before and after that was just over the hill that actually goes into the creek. So this ephemeral creek had deposited some soil at the Summersville fire, but with our discussions with the landowner, East Bay Regional Parks, we collectively decided that this area should be left alone without any repairs being done. The reason for that is because the slope across from where this photo was taken, is actually very unstable. It was almost like sand or moon sand. Sometimes you'll hear us refer to it as such. You would take one step on that side and it would just dump more and more into the creek. We offered up jute matting as a solution, but the park does have cattle that would most likely try to eat that matting or tear it out of place, which is not ideal, especially for an area that's as sensitive as that. The other option was to use a small excavator, which is nice because you can actually position that excavator parallel to that creek crossing, and they can just use their bucket to reshape that channel, which again, we just decided to leave it as is after our discussions with the landowner. The only thing that is bad about this is that with all this material in the creek, eventually when there's a large water event, that soil will be transported. Thankfully, this doesn't feed into any larger tributaries or anywhere where some more sensitive species like salmon or amphibians are typically going to be at. So that is why another reason why we decided to not repair this creek crossing. The last thing is water replenishment. This is a photo from the Creek Fire back in 2024, and it shows a stock pond. If you guys don't know what a stock pond is, it's pretty much where livestock, cattle can go and get their water. Because of the small amount of water sources at our disposal in the wildland environment, sometimes we're forced to use whatever water we can find. So in this case, it just happened to be a stock pond, and our resources that will utilize this will be our engines, helicopters, and sometimes water tenders. But when you're pulling from resources like this where you can't really tell what's in there, it's important to utilize strainers so that we're not bringing in mud sediment into our engine or our pumping systems. Um, so with this being said, the use of water tenders, which are another piece of heavy equipment, they can carry thousands of gallons of water. With those water tenders, we were able to refill the pond after we were able to do our fire suppression repair and mop up the fire. The one thing we had to be mindful of when we were utilizing those water tenders is making sure that we're not using treated water. Any water that is treated, um, typically with chlorine, has the ability to kill larval forms of amphibians and other creatures. So we had to make sure that all the water that we were bringing in was untreated or reverse osmosis water, which can be a little difficult to find hydrants or facilities that allow us to get that water. But again, we want to make sure that when we're refilling these stock ponds for the not only the cattle that are on that land, but the natural resources and mammals, amphibians that are going to use that resource are given the best resource possible in return. And that's going to do it for my presentation. Thank you, guys.
Awesome. Thank you so much to both of you, Captain Anderson and James. Really, really appreciate it. I think a lot of these topics are things that, you know, aren't often covered. So I really appreciate you both coming here and giving us a presentation. I think today we're gonna skip Q&A or live Q&A at least, just because we are running up on the hour. So I recommend if you do have any questions for either of the presenters, please feel free to use the feedback form, and I can get those questions forwarded to James or Captain Anderson. Just want to thank you again, everyone, for attending the webinar and for supporting the series. Our very last activity of the series is going to be a field trip to the North Arenda Shaded Field Break in a couple of weeks. So I'll put the registration form in the chat if you are interested. And I hope you all enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
Great. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.